Hey guys, welcome back! The Italian developer that we know today as Milestone has been around since 1994, since the release of Super Loops for the Super Nintendo. It was founded by Antonio Farina and then known as Graffiti, releasing their second game a year later. Iron Assault was an MS-DOS exclusive, and in that same year came also for DOS the groundbreaking Screamer. This was when console and arcade enthusiasts started to look differently at PCs, cause these beasts were starting to show all their potential. So, let's take a look. 1995 was the year when the iconic Need for Speed franchise took off on PCs along with Destruction Derby, but there was this small intruder trying to survive between those two big sharks. Racing games were evolving too rapidly, from the sprites of Outrun and the primitive 3D graphics of R-Driven to incredibly fast texture-mapped 3D graphics of Virtua Racing, Ridge Racer and Daytona USA. And while everyone was waiting for those games to be ported to the brand new generation of consoles, the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation, Screamer arose from this still obscure and unknown Italian developer by the name Graffiti, leaving speechless all those console players. Graffiti built in-house their own full 3D engine, and after showing a sci-fi themed demo to Virgin Interactive, they were blown away and immediately wanted for Graffiti to use that impressive engine not on a sci-fi game, but on a racing game. This was in a time when affordable 3D accelerated graphics cards were practically non-existent, so Graffiti's game engine needed to be rendered entirely by software. This was a problem for all those that didn't possess a beefy machine equipped with the latest high-end processors like the recently released Pentium by the almighty Intel. But if you happen to be one of those lucky gamers, you would experience a racing game like no other, something never seen on any console or PC till that time. By the way, and talking about that, before the release of Screamer, my most played racing games on the PC were Network Q Rack Rally, published by Europress, and IndyCar Racing from Papyrus, both released a couple of years prior. But Screamer took me to a whole new level of immersion and engagement, with living and breathing 3D graphics and fully textured mapped tracks, with tunnels, bridges, canyons, and airplanes crossing the skies above our heads. It was just like if the arcade in town had moved inside my own house. Bear in mind that this came from a really small developer and in a time without internet or any type of connection to other developers to share experiences and know-how, and as said, rendering through hardware wasn't a thing yet. Screamer's 3D software renderer would allow some impressive next-gen effects, clouds, buildings and other objects being reflected on the cars, and night versions of each track with neon lighting are just a small example of that. 6 tracks and 7 non-licensed vehicles are available. 6 of these vehicles are obviously inspired on real-life supercars like the Ferrari F40, the Lamborghini Diablo, the Mitsubishi GTO, the Porsche 911 Turbo, the Corvette C4 and the Bugatti EB110, and the over-the-top crashes and drifting would automatically tell us that we were facing a high-octane, ultra-fast arcade racer in the likes of Daytona USA and Ridge Racer, breaking that more serious feel and look of the personal computer that was seen as something exclusively crafted for boring stuff and not to play games with fast 3D graphics. After choosing one car and the type of transmission, automatic or manual, we could tackle the Championship League, the Slalom mode, the Attack mode, or a sort of minigame called Cone Carnage, in where we would knock down as many traffic cones as possible. These modes were only available in this very first Screamer, and they were a request from the publisher Virgin Interactive. Obviously that a game of this nature would also feature an incredible sound engine and an over-the-top commentator.
What's wrong? Too much pressure? Yeehaw!
Also, and as a fun fact, the game's soundtrack was composed by the amazing Alistair Brimble, known by then for providing amazing music and sound effects for a ton of games for the Commodore Amiga like Super Frog, Alien Breed and Project X.
Number one! Just what I want to see!
You might think that Screamer was in direct confrontation with the Need for Speed in what PC gaming is concerned, but Graffiti wasn't even aware that Electronic Arts was releasing a PC version of their latest racing game. These were the days without internet, folks! Released a few months after the Need for Speed, it was immediately praised by the press for offering what EA's game couldn't obviously match due to its more sim-oriented nature, a fast-paced and colorful arcade racing experience. In the meanwhile, this piece of advertising was being published in magazines around Christmas, but ended up generating a bit of controversy and hate. Graffiti started working on a sequel right after the release of the original Screamer. It would offer a lot more vehicles and went for a more rally-oriented style of gameplay. 2-player split-screen mode and multiplayer over network for 4 players simultaneously was also added, along with support for 3D hardware in the form of a patch that was later made available by the developer. By this time, Graffiti also changed its name to Milestone. Released in late 1996, it received praise for its soundtrack, gameplay and graphical quality, but it would need at least a Pentium 166 to get the most out of it. The AI was also improved, with other cars occasionally making mistakes, offering an advanced physics simulation model that could be fun to drive. Every car had its own specific handling, something quite hard to implement due to hardware limitations. But the 12 people behind its development, yes 12, were resilient and extremely focused on their work that everything was possible to achieve. Screamer Rally came a few months after Screamer 2, and it's probably the one that players most fondly recall. This third title from the trilogy was seen internally as a sort of data disk for Screamer 2 with a new interface, new tracks and new cars, cause it used practically the same game code. As the name suggests, it revolves around rally racing and really making use of 3D FX voodoo graphics, something that was gaining enthusiasts all over the world really quickly, and I was one of them. To this day, Milestone continues to create incredible racing games based on a bunch of different disciplines, and I'm always waiting for their latest release, cause as said, I'm a true fan of their work since they released the very first and groundbreaking Screamer. So guys, have you played Screamer back in the day or any other from the trilogy? Many still think that Screamer 4x4 is part of the series, but that one was developed by another team that used the name Screamer just to grab extra attention from the public. I've already reviewed it some time ago, so feel free to check it out. Also, and if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe and click on that bell icon so that you're notified when my next video becomes available. And if you're feeling generous, you can become a member right here on YouTube or through Patreon. Your support will be extremely appreciated. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Cheers!